Well, that's not the reason why the Quran was revealed. The Quran, the ultimate objective of the Quran is for us to understand and to act upon it.
Will they get
Someone who has these qualities that you have, O Muhammad alayhi salatu salam, Allah tabarak wa ta'ala never abandon them. Allah will never forsake them. Allah will be with you. That's a fact, she said to him. He said, I served you for 10 years. Never said to me, why did you do this? She grabbed the dish and she smashed it in front of the Prophet.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome, my brothers and sisters. Welcome, all people, to the Sacred Brothers podcast. I'm your host, Junaid Raja, and this is my co-host,
Ali Murabit.
And we are here today with our beloved Ustadh Yahya Raaby.
Ahlan wa sahlan. Jazakumullah khair. Allah yabarak.
So, inshallah, today we're going to be talking about, as we always do, all things sacred. We're going to start with a quick fire round.
Inshallah, bismillah. So, Ustad, first quick question.
Bismillah.
I know your thobes are amazing. So, what's your favorite thobe to wear, and what color is your favorite?
My favorite color is dark blue.
Dark blue.
So it's in between dark blue or white.
Right.
And I should wear white today. When I saw the couches, I realized maybe brown wasn't a good idea.
Yeah, brown.
I'm camouflaged now.
It is camouflaged, but hopefully you guys can see him. Next question, Ustadh.
Aywa.
How many children would you like to have in the future?
As many as Allah Azza wa Jalla grants us, the more the merrier.
MashaAllah. So there's no limit on that then?
No limit, ya Sheikh. You want more. The more children you have, the more rizq comes.
Yeah. How do you manage that though?
Allah Azza wa Jalla tells you, with each child, with each human being that comes into the world, their rizq is recorded, right?
Yeah.
So you become richer with more children.
Okay.
I'm going for the easy ones, subhanAllah.
Bismillah.
Bismillah. Ustad, I heard you've got a secret tea recipe. Would you like to disclose the tea recipe?
If I disclosed it, it wouldn't be a secret.
Sah.
Open secret.
Open secret.
Inshallah, maybe one day well, to be honest, the secret is the sugar, I think.
Yeah, no, for real. Like whenever my dad asks me to make tea, and then he says 2 sugars, he always just
Of course.
because they will say no, is it 2 sugars? But really, he wants more, but he doesn't want to say it. Everyone wants to be health conscious. Last question, controversial one. 1 or 4? No.
I like multiple things of everything.
MashaAllah. The more the merrier.
Of course.
That's what we say.
More khair,
Merrier.
more barakah.
Okay. Khalas, jazakallahu khairan. Inshallah, we're going to be talking specifically about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's household, and we're going to be learning from details about how he was as a man. Obviously, we know from the Quran that we are supposed to take him as our exemplar, and that we're supposed to follow him. Uswatan hasana. He's like the best example, right? And he's not someone that is distant and even though maybe he's living in a different time in a different context, God has sent him as a messenger for rahmatan lil alameen, for all of the people, for all nations. So we can still be benefiting from him today, even in 2023. Oh, sorry, my bear off, bro. 2024. See, I'm still catching up. So I think it's good if we just get some insights from Ustadh about how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was. In particular, we know about him in the public life. How was he in the private life, in the household? So just beginning, Ustadh, can you tell us a bit about just generally the Prophet ﷺ's kind of philosophy of dealing with the family life? How was he with his family?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, thanawulillah, salatu ala rasulillah. That's a very good question. It's a very good, beautiful topic, because a lot of time we tend to discuss how the Prophet ﷺ was outside, how he was with his companions, how he was with the enemies of Islam on the battlefield, how he was teaching, etc. But we don't tend to perhaps look into how he was in his home, because a person, you truly know how a person truly is, their true nature, when they are at home in their comfort zone with their family and so on, right? But the Prophet ﷺ was the exact same person at home. He was the exact same person in terms of ibadah, in terms of his relationship with his family, in terms of his compassion, in terms of being keen to always teach. Just like he was keen to teach the Sahaba, he was very keen to teach his family. The Prophet ﷺ, he was one who used to serve his family. As we have in the hadith, كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في خدمة أهله. He used to serve his family, he used to take care of them, he used to do whatever he can to help them and to assist them and so on. Rather, he didn't see any shame in that. He used to dedicate times of the day to just family. And these times of the day that the Prophet ﷺ used to dedicate to the family, it used to be, majority of it used to be around Dhuhr time, and the majority of it used to be after Salat al-Maghrib and Isha. After these times, he never used to give it to other people. Whereas the morning time and the Asr time, and these times he used to give to other people, the Sahaba, those who want to learn, etc. But as for the evening and that time in the afternoon and the part before Dhuhr as well, he will dedicate to helping the family, doing whatever needs to be done at home, etc. Alayhi afdalu salatu wassalam. And as you know, the Prophet alayhi salatu had numerous households, right? Because he had more than one wife. And alayhi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, having numerous wives, it proved that there was a number of difficulties that come with it, right? Because the nature of women is that they're going to be jealous of one another and so on. So how did the Prophet alayhi sallam deal with that? Because it's not very easy to deal with 9 wives, right? There's a narration that one day all the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, they came together except Aisha. All of them came together. It's a very important meeting they're having. What are they discussing? This time that they're having this meeting, the Prophet ﷺ, he's in the house of Aisha. It's Aisha's time, yani. So they are having this meeting discussing Aisha. They're all jealous of Aisha. Politics. So what do? They know that they can't go directly to the Prophet ﷺ and make this complaint to him. Rather, they said the only way we can get to him is we need to get someone who he perhaps loves more than Aisha. So they called his daughter Fatima. They said, Fatima, come. We have an urgent matter we need to discuss. So she listened to them and they told her, listen, we are asking you to speak to your father, the Prophet ﷺ, to be just regarding us and Ibn Abi Quhafa. They don't say her name. They don't want to say her name. Ibn Abi Quhafa. They call her, not even her father's name, her grandfather's Abu Quhafa. The daughter of Abu Quhafa. So Fatima goes to the Prophet ﷺ in the house of Aisha. She seeks permission and she's granted permission. She enters. And she said, Ya Rasulullah, inna azwajaka, verily your wives, they are seeking al-adl fi ibnati Abi Quhafa, regarding the daughter of Abi Quhafa. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he listened to Fatima, he said to her, Ya Fatima, listen to me carefully. Do you love that which I love? She said, of course, Ya Rasulullah. He said to her, then love her as well. Then she said, very well, she left. She went back to the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. She said, I told the Prophet ﷺ what you requested. And this was his response. So they told her, no, go back to him and tell him this and etc. She said, listen, I'm not going back. I'm not discussing this matter with him ever again. This is the end of it for me. So now they're thinking, what do we do? What's the next plan? What's plan B? So they decided we're going to send Zainab bint Jahsh. Who's narrating the hadith, by the way, is Aisha. She narrates the whole incident. Zainab bint Jahsh, they decided to send her. Why? Aisha said she was the only one who used to compete with me when it comes to beauty and so on. And Aisha actually praises Zainab. Even though these women are jealous of her and they're saying things about her, etc. She said, وَمَا رَأَيْتُ, I have not seen أَتْقَى لِلَّهِ مِنْهَا, I have not seen anyone more conscious of Allah than Zainab, and gives more charity than her and keeps ties with her kin and is more truthful in her speech. She's praising Zainab, right? And then she says Zainab, she came to the Prophet ﷺ, she sought permission, and Zainab was very well spoken. So when she came, she made her case. And Aisha's getting agitated. She says that I'm getting very agitated, very annoyed. And I'm looking at the Prophet ﷺ, hoping that he's going to give me an opportunity to respond. So the Prophet ﷺ didn't seem like he was going to stop me from responding. So as soon as Zainab finished speaking, she said, I responded, I defended myself, and I completely dragged her on the ground, she said, meaning with my words, the way I made my evidence very clear for what I was saying, because she's very well spoken, Aisha as well. And then the Prophet ﷺ, after Aisha completely finished and thrashed Zainab, the Prophet ﷺ, he laughed. And he said, see, she's the daughter of Abi Bakr, and that's why I love her, basically. Right? And then Zainab went back. Why did the Prophet ﷺ do that? The Prophet ﷺ, his wives are coming to him and they are basically saying to him, we're asking you to be just. Right? Because they are jealous. But this statement is a statement that is wrong in the first place, right? Saying to the Prophet ﷺ, you're not being just. That's what they're implying. But the Prophet ﷺ never got worked up about that. He never got angry. Rather, he was calm the whole time. He never responded to him even regarding this statement, because he knows what's causing him to say this is jealousy. Secondly, the Prophet ﷺ, when Zainab came, he never responded and defended Aisha, because that may make them say, you know what, he's showing that he prefers Aisha over us. He let Aisha defend herself, and that ended the matter without making a fuss and making the problem escalating and making it bigger than it actually is. And you see that in numerous occasions with the Prophet ﷺ in his household. You find it in the Prophet, when the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, they all came together, they asked him for an increase in their allowance. And the Prophet ﷺ found that very difficult, and he wasn't able to give them that. He left them for a month, right? Completely left them for a whole month. He didn't fight with them, he didn't quarrel with them, he didn't argue with them, nothing. And after a month, Allah Azza wa Jalla revealed the ayah of giving them a choice. To either choose the dunya or choose the Prophet ﷺ, and every single one of them chose the Prophet ﷺ, of course. The Prophet ﷺ, how was he with his children? Because the Prophet ﷺ had children, right? The Prophet ﷺ, he had 7 children. All of these children are from Khadija except one, Ibrahim, who is from Mari al-Qibtiyya. But the Prophet ﷺ, he loved these children a lot. He had a very special connection with his children. However, majority of the children of the Prophet ﷺ, they all died whilst they were young. And they all died in his lifetime except Fatima. And Fatima is the one that the Prophet ﷺ, he had an extremely close relationship with her. That he, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he would say, Fatima bid'atun minni, she's a part of me. Whoever harms Fatima has harmed me. Right? He was one who would sit with his daughter. If he was sitting in a majlis, there will be a gathering like this, and his daughter Fatima will come in, he will make her sit on his chair to honor her. That's how the Prophet ﷺ was. He would show his compassion and show it in front of others. Alayhi afdalu salatu wa taslim. And he constantly would express this, and he raised her with that, these teachings and these morals, and he raised her as a righteous daughter, so that when she was a grown woman and she was married and she had her own house and her own children, she would always be one who would come to her father, and she would try to serve her father, and she would be close to her father, and she would not want to be far away from her father, radiyallahu anha. And the Prophet ﷺ, to the extent that when he was on his deathbed and he was dying, ﷺ, Fatima came to him in the house of Aisha, and he whispered 2 things in her ears. The first thing, when he said it to her, she cried. And then when he said the second thing to her, she rejoiced. The first thing that he told her is that he's going to pass away, he's going to die. And then she cried that she's going to lose her father. And then when he told her the second thing, that it was that she is going to be the first one from his family to join him. And she rejoiced because she doesn't want to be separated from her father. That's how close they were. Even in death, she doesn't want to be separated. That's the relationship that the Prophet ﷺ had with his children. Alayhi afdalu salatu wa taslim. He buried all of his children in his lifetime. Imagine when he buried his son Ibrahim, his last son, when he buried him in Medina, the Prophet ﷺ, he cried. The Sahaba, they found this strange. Because they thought when someone dies that you're not permitted to cry. They thought part of being patient was that you're not allowed to cry. So they said, Atabki ya Rasulullah, are you crying, O Messenger of Allah? And the Prophet ﷺ said to them, Innama hiya dumu'ur rahmah. He said, these are the tears of mercy. He said, Inna al-qalba la yahzan, wa inna al-ayna la tadma', wa inna ala firaqika Ibrahim al-mahzun. He said that really the heart is saddened and the eye sheds tears, and we are saddened by your departure, O Ibrahim. That's how the Prophet ﷺ was. So this is our Messenger ﷺ. He was one who, he said, خيركم خيركم لأهله وأنا خيركم لأهلي. The best of you are those who are the best of their families. I'm not the best amongst you to your families. To be one who is even better to his family than other people, who's conscious of he's fulfilling the rights of his family. The Prophet ﷺ would have sittings of samar at night when you're just sitting and your wives and your family are just telling stories, right? And he would sit there and they'll tell him stories. We have the famous hadith Zara', which is Aisha radiallahu anha. She went to a meeting with a group of women, all these wives, and these women, they all made a pact that they're all going to speak truthfully about their husbands. So each one, she says, he speaks about husbands. Some of them said good things about their husbands, some of them said bad things about their husband, until we got to Zara'. Zara', she praised the husband Abu Zara'. She says that he was the best husband, his children are the best children, he took care of them, etc. She's saying this, but Abu Zara' has divorced her, right? They're no longer married. But she's still singing his praises because of how much of a good man he was. So the Prophet ﷺ, he smiled at Aisha. He said to her, I am to you, Aisha, how Abu Zara' was to Zara', except that I won't divorce. He said that, right? So the Prophet ﷺ was listening to these stories, etc. Well, some people say, oh, this is woman talk, I don't want to hear it. But the Prophet ﷺ listens to it, he's actually paying attention, he's responding to the story, and he's, mashallah, and he's interacting with it. That's how he was, alayhi salatu wasalam.
There was another number of things going through my head when you were saying that. I mean, one of the things amazing, like, you normally hear about how obviously children should be respecting their parents and stuff, but it's really interesting that narration that the Prophet ﷺ respecting his child, showing that kind of like, it's very hard when you've seen like someone come from like being a baby who you just like play with, do you know what I mean? Like, then being like actually respecting them, giving them that honor and dignity. So that's really interesting.
Exactly, and he'll declare it. He'll say, she's a part of me.
Wow.
Whoever honors her has honored me. Whoever harms her has harmed me.
Yeah, that's
imagine.
Really interesting. And I was just wondering, I mean, practically speaking, like, obviously now we live in the age of like phones and everything like that. So you talking about how the Prophet ﷺ, despite being an army general, despite being, you know, the leader of the people, despite being whatever, the judge between the people, and then somehow managing to find time for 9 wives, and that being a praiseworthy thing, obviously. But then maybe we don't have the same culture, but as in that, just how, I mean, there would still be, I'm guessing, people who would come back and forth, even maybe, or maybe they would know that this is the time of the Prophet ﷺ with his family, so they would leave him alone. But how do we, in like 2024, for example, we are when we're with our families and we have like different phone calls, different like people trying to speak to us, how do you think, what do you advise that we should do so we can make sure we find time with our families?
Wallahi, look, with the Prophet ﷺ, something that you notice with the Prophet ﷺ, it is prioritizing. Prioritizing that which is more important and giving it is due right, and not leaving it until it's done properly. And the Prophet ﷺ, he demonstrated that throughout his life, especially when it came to his family. And even his family, in order to give them their rights, sometimes what he would do qur'ah between his wives. Qur'ah is pulling lots, right? So that
in order
to for instance, when he'd be going on a journey, one of his wives will always accompany him. But in order to choose which wife will come with him, he will get them to draw lots, and whoever gets the lot, they go with the Prophet ﷺ, right? So that's how it was. So he wanted to be fair in every way possible, and he was ﷺ fair in every way possible. But of course, the matters of the heart is what Allah will not hold you accountable for. Of course, so someone's heart may be inclined towards one person more than the other. But when it came to the actions, the Prophet ﷺ was exactly the same, treating them all fairly exactly the same. Alayhi salatu wassalam. But if you go even further back, and you go to the first wife of the Prophet ﷺ, Khadija bint Khuwaylid. Khadija, the Prophet ﷺ, he married her when he was 25 years old. And he was married to her for 25 years. Khadija, the Prophet ﷺ never married another woman with her. We had no intention to marry anyone else. Rather, the Prophet ﷺ loved her dearly. And he would mention that all the time. Even after her death, he would always praise her and mention how much he loved her. He would say, Inni ruziqtu hubbaha, that the love of Khadija has been embedded in me. Right? Allah has given me that as rizq. He would say that. To the extent that the other wives of the Prophet ﷺ, they would be jealous of Khadija after her death. Like, she's no longer here, she's no longer a threat, but they would be jealous of her because of how much the Prophet ﷺ loved her and how much he would praise her and mention her and so on. Khadija, when she was married to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ, when he lived with her and they lived together in the same home, there was never a single incident where the Prophet ﷺ and Khadija ever had an argument, ever had a disagreement, ever had a dispute. Never. Never occurred in 25 years. Imagine. We have the hadith that Jibreel alayhi salam, he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said to him, Ya Muhammad, Khadija is going to come to you with a bowl of soup. When she comes to you, inform her that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala greets her, gives her salam, and that I give her salam, and that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has promised to her a palace in paradise that's made of jewels, and there's no noise in it and no fatigue and illness. Why does he say that there's no noise in her palace in Jannah? Because the household of the Prophet ﷺ never had any noise in this dunya. Therefore, she'll be rewarded that in Jannah as well. Radiyallahu anha wa ardaha. But then notice something else here in this narration. We mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ, he used to serve his family. And he didn't see any shame in doing so. And he used to dedicate times of the day to serving his family. But Khadija radiyallahu anha, she's a businesswoman. She's very wealthy. You know, Khadija, she never worked a day in her life. Never did. Even when because Khadija, her wealth, it came from inheritance. She inherited it from her deceased husbands. When she inherited that wealth, she used it to do business. However, she never worked. She actually employed men to work for her. And they went on the business trips and they went to Sham. That's how she met the Prophet ﷺ, because he was working for her, going to Sham and doing business on her behalf. And she continued like that. She stayed at home. She used to serve the Prophet ﷺ despite being this wealthy businesswoman. Jibreel is saying that she's going to come with a bowl of soup. She's serving the Prophet ﷺ, right? She didn't see any shame in that, because marriage, it's a partnership. It is that one is merciful to one another, that you show you love to one another, you help each other, you assist each other, you take care of each other. It's not, oh, you just do your role and I'll do my role, and we keep asking each other for our rights, but there's no compassion, no mercy, no love, no affection. No, that's what marriage is all about. It's meant to be that affection, that love, and that mercy is meant to be there. for one another, and that's what they demonstrated. Khadija, she had wealth, and when the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't have much wealth, and the wealth of his wife is hers. He would never ask for it. One day the Prophet ﷺ would see a person who's in extreme need, who requires charity, but he has nothing to give them. And Khadija will realize that the Prophet ﷺ is saddened because he has nothing to give them. She would give him wealth to give to charity. Imagine, right? This is the sort of relationship that he had his wife, alayhi salatu wassalam. So what he did was that he organized his time. And the Prophet ﷺ, the way he organized his time was around the salawat al-khams, the 5 daily prayers. Like I mentioned earlier on. After Salat al-Fajr, he would have certain duties that he would attend to. After Salat al-Dhuhr, certain things that he would attend to. After Asr, certain duties. After Maghrib, certain duties. And after Isha, he would go home, he would not speak to anyone. He disliked speaking to anyone after Salat Isha, straight to his family. Right? Alayhi salatu salam.
Put your phone on like do not disturb maybe.
No. He did that, sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yeah, actually, subhanAllah, sticking with that topic, not only just a more general, I think, discussion. I feel like, sticking with the current situation, 2024, not 2023, 2024. I feel like, a lot of Muslim households maybe have like lost touch with kind of the roles in the marriage. How, briefly, would you say, Ustad, the Prophet ﷺ fostered that love in the household and balance between his wives and kept that love in the household of the Prophet ﷺ?
And the Prophet ﷺ, he kept that love by being the man in the relationship. The man, the husband, he is not allowed to let his emotions lead him. He doesn't have the privilege of letting his emotions lead him. Women do, but the man doesn't. And I'll give you an example. The Prophet ﷺ, one day, he had some guests coming to the house of Aisha, right? And the wives of the Prophet ﷺ used to compete. So Zainab, it is said, or one of the other wives of the Prophet ﷺ, I don't remember if it was Zainab or Salama or someone else, but it's one of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. What she did was that she prepared food and she gave it to one of her servants to take to the house of Aisha to serve to the guests. When this was brought to the house of Aisha radiallahu anha, she became extremely angry. She was given the dish, right? But she lost it. Why did she lose it? Because it's making it seem like she can't host the guests, that she can't cater for them, she can't cook for them, etc. And she grabbed the dish and she smashed it in front of the Prophet ﷺ. Completely smashed it. She completely lost it, right? Now, if that happened in someone's house today, that imagine you have guests in the house and your wife, she smashes the plate in front of the guests. What do? You probably tell everyone get out and I have to do this now, right? The Prophet ﷺ, you know what he did? He smiled. And then he just looked at the Sahaba and he said to them, "Gharat ummukum," your mother became jealous. And everything carried on as if nothing happened. He just cleaned it up. Life goes on. Why? Because if the Prophet ﷺ got emotional, got angry, that would have caused a bigger problem than the problem that already exists. Therefore, the Prophet ﷺ showed that one has to have that self-restraint. That they have to be the one who, you have to be the husband, the one who's calm. You have to be the one who's in control. You're not allowed to let yourself go, right? So that's what the Prophet ﷺ demonstrated for us men. But he also showed us that as a husband, you need to be one who's very merciful and kind to your women folk. That you let a lot of things go. You don't take everything seriously. You don't constantly argue with your wives. You don't find every situation, every small thing to pick out, to complain about, etc. Overlook a lot of things, right? Be as one who is extremely forbearing and extremely lenient, etc. Because that's what will allow you to live together in harmony. But if you're constantly nagging someone, why did you do this? Why did you do that, etc., then it'll be very difficult and you'll just find each other annoying, right? You won't be able to bear each other, right? He wasn't only like that with his wives. Even his servants, who are, their job is to serve him and to make sure they do everything correctly. Anas bin Malik, who used to serve the Prophet ﷺ, he said the Prophet ﷺ never ever said to me. He said, I served you for 10 years. Never said to me, why did you do this? He never said to me, why didn't you do this? He never ever rebuked me. Never. Imagine someone who you're dealing with every day, who's going to get naturally things wrong, who's not going to do everything the way you want him to do, etc. Never ever said to him, why do you do this? Why do you... Never. Right? That's how he was, alayhi salam. He showed us that character. It must be consistent at all times. It's not that some people, they are very good when it comes to people outside their household. When they're in their home, they have the worst character. But when he's outside, he's very nice and very calm and very patient, very forbearing, he's very gentle. At home, he's the biggest monster. Right? It's meant to be like that consistently at all times. Rather, you're meant to be even more gentle with your family. Because these are the people that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, He made an act of worship for you to be kind to be good to. Rather, Allah made an obligation, right? And that you shall be asked about on the Day of Judgment. Therefore, one should take that even more seriously. So that's how the Prophet ﷺ was. He demonstrated that. And just like that, the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, they showed what it means to be a wife. What it means to be one who follows the leadership of her husband. Who does not question his authority. Yes, consult another, but he has the final say. The Prophet ﷺ would give that leeway for his wives to give their opinions, to give him advice, etc., to hear from them. He will listen to them. But at the end of the day, he has the final say, because it doesn't work naturally if there are two people who are leading the ship. There's going to be chaos. There's going to be two people. They're going to be fighting. They're going to make different decisions. And they're going to fight over that. But there has to be one person who has the final say. Every organization has to have, it can only function like that. Otherwise, it'll be chaotic. So what about the greatest organization that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala has established, which is the household, which is the family unit, which is a secret establishment that Allah has established, because it's a contract that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala has established from the heavens, and Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala has made it an act of worship by keeping that intact, and Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, the children and all that which comes from it, Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, by preserving it and protecting it, it is what's going to help society flourish. And if it becomes corrupt, then society will become corrupt. So of course that needs to be protected more than any company, any organization.
I think we see it a lot in the UK as well, especially like you have broken families, you have so many people like maybe growing up in single parent households, and then it leads to other things like drugs, and
it can lead to many corruption.
Loads of crazy stuff.
It makes it easier for shaitan to infiltrate the family when there's less people there combating him. Right?
And especially those roles, like obviously the
essential
father figure, having that authority, having that and then the mum showing that rahmah, that love and care, and then being fostered in that. And then imagine someone being completely removed from that, and then imagine what that does to someone's mind, and like Ustadh said, imagine what that does to society at large. And we see it, and society at large, it becomes like just broken down really. And it's
100%.
It's really, I think I was even thinking, can you give us an example of like a time where the Prophet ﷺ took advice from one of his wives?
Of course, the Prophet ﷺ, when he went to Hudaybiyah, when he was going to Hudaybiyah, and him and the Sahaba, they travelled to go perform Umrah, and then Quraysh refused them entry to Mecca, and they were in Hudaybiyah, and the treaty of Hudaybiyah happened. After the treaty was done, the Prophet ﷺ, he commanded the Sahaba to shave their heads and to go get out of the state of Ihram and to head back to Medina. But they were upset regarding the treaty. Some of them felt like it wasn't fair. So what happened? The Prophet ﷺ, when he told them and instructed them to do this, nobody shaved their heads. So the Prophet ﷺ went into his tent, and his wife Salama was there. And he told her, he was upset about this. So he expressed his feelings to his wife Salama and what was going on. And then she told him, Ya Rasulullah, you go out and go shave your head in front of your companions, and that will get them all to do the same thing. And the Prophet ﷺ, he took advice and he went outside and he started shaving his head. When the Sahaba saw that, they felt ashamed that they hadn't shaved their head. They all rushed to shave their heads. That was the advice of his wife Salama radiallahu anha, helping him solve a issue that is currently occurring, right? So the Prophet ﷺ didn't see an issue in that. The Prophet ﷺ would speak to his wives, he would consult them, he would speak to them about issues that need their consultation. And he ﷺ, if he saw it fit, he would take that advice, and a lot of it was sound advice, right? So that's how the Prophet ﷺ was. He didn't see any shame in taking advice from anyone, even if they were a child. Imagine the Prophet ﷺ consulted Ali bin Abi Talib and Usama ibn Zayd. When is the Prophet ﷺ consulting Usama ibn Zayd? He's around maybe 12, 13 years old. And he's consulting about his family's household in Hadithat al-Ifk. And when he heard both of the opinions, Ali and Usama, who did the Prophet ﷺ listen to? He listened to Usama, not Ali. He took Usama's opinion, and he took that on board, even though Usama is a lot younger than Ali, and Ali is a lot more senior and a lot more knowledgeable, but he took the advice of Usama ibn Zayd, even though he's a child. because the Prophet ﷺ didn't. He had that humility that he didn't see that he was above taking advice. If the advice was sound, he would take it. ﷺ. He wasn't arrogant in that way. But just like that, the Prophet ﷺ, he showed us also decisiveness. That there's times that there has to be only one way, because there's no way, there's no place for too many opinions now or to listen. Exactly.
Yeah.
The Prophet in Uhud,
It's haram at war.
the Prophet ﷺ, he consulted the companions regarding the Battle of Uhud, whether they should leave the city or defend the city from within. And he preferred to stay within Medina and to defend the city from within the city. But the younger companions who didn't participate in Badr, they preferred to go out and fight because they didn't get the opportunity to go out and fight in Badr. So they said to the Prophet ﷺ, this is what we want. And the Prophet ﷺ, he saw that the overwhelming majority was of that opinion, so he took their opinion even though he didn't prefer it. And he went inside and he put on his armor. Then the Sahaba, they felt guilty. They said we kind of pressured the Prophet ﷺ to take our opinion even though he didn't prefer it. So they said they sent his uncle Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib to go to the Prophet ﷺ and say that we've taken it back. Ya Rasulullah, we apologize. We will stay in Medina, from Medina. The Prophet ﷺ, he said to Hamza, it's not befitting for a prophet to take off his armor until he's gone to warfare. He's put on his armor. Why did he, even though he preferred the previous opinion, but why did he not change his mind now? Because it's at a stage where it's very sensitive, that if he was to change his mind now, it could show weakness.
Yeah.
And as a leader, there has to be times that you have to make that decisive decision and stick to it no matter what. Because if you keep changing, it will cause instability in your people, amongst the people. People will lose confidence in you, etc. So the bigger problem. So the Prophet ﷺ was decisive when it was required.
And actually sticking on the topic of of leadership, you mentioned subhanallah, the Prophet ﷺ was very decisive as a leader. What would you say some practical lessons we can learn from the Prophet ﷺ's life and being a leader, not only to the people but more generally being a leader in the household, and being able to be decisive?
No. You know, it's more difficult to be leader in your household than being a leader outside your household. Because leading a household, your family, they see you in every state. They see you in every situation. They see you when you are weak, when you are strong. They see you when you are happy and when you're upset. They see you when you are sick and when you are healthy. They see you in every single situation. Therefore, their vision of you and their perception of you is very different to those who are outside your household, because they only see a certain side to you. Therefore, the Prophet ﷺ, he was trained from a very young age by Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala to be a leader in every way possible. Why? At the age of 12, he started working as a shepherd. He started working because his uncle Abu Talib was not able to provide financially. He decided, I'm going to help him out. He started working as a shepherd. And every single prophet and messenger was a shepherd at certain points in their life, to prepare them for leadership, to prepare them for prophethood, right? And being a shepherd, there's many lessons that you learn from it. You learn compassion. You learn forbearance. You learn patience. You learn courage. You learn to be one who is able to differentiate between people. All these different qualities that one has, you can learn it in by being a shepherd. And the Prophet, we learned all these things. How do you learn that? Because when you're herding sheep, amongst the sheep, there are going to be those who are weak and those who are a bit stronger, those who are slow, those who are fast, etc. So you need to be able to differentiate between all of them and be able to keep them all together and unite them, right? Because amongst the people are going to be the same thing. When you're leading people, there's going to be one who's weak, one who's perhaps his understanding is not that great, and another one who understands very well, very strong, one who's very hasty, one who's very slow, one who's very who gets angry very quickly, one who's very patient. You have all different. You find them in the sheep as well. So it gives you that variety, so that you're able to deal with them. Secondly, when you're herding sheep, you learn to be merciful. Why? Because a sheep, one day there's going to be one who's going to be sick amongst them. You're going to have to take care of them. You're going to have to help them get better, get healthy again, etc. And so on. Keep them all together. Protect them from anything that may harm them. So it gives you that rahmah, like they're your children, right? When you're herding sheep, you learn courage and bravery. Why? Because you're going to be the one who protects the sheep from any animals, wolves that may attack them. You have to be prepared to fight those wolves and to defend your sheep from them. You have to be ready to prepare to kill the wolf if it's going to attack one of your sheep. It teaches you bravery and courage. There are going to be places that are going to be dangerous. You're going to go in there and protect your sheep, right? That bravery and courage is there. When you are a shepherd, you learn to be forbearing and patient. There are going to be certain sheep that are going to give you a hard time. One who's going to keep running away, and you're going to have to keep pulling them back, etc. So you learn patience and to not lose your cool and to get angry. It teaches all of these things. When you're herding sheep, the Prophet ﷺ herding sheep in the desert majority of the times, the climate is very tough. It teaches you to be one who is able to survive in these difficult climates, difficult situation, yani, and to be one who's quick on his feet, who's able to come up with solutions quickly because of where you are. All this you learn it, and these are the qualities that one requires in order to be a leader, whether he's a leader in his household or he's a leader for the ummah, and that's exactly what Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala is preparing him for.
I think we should become shepherds, bro.
Yeah.
And we should become shepherds, man. There's a lot you can learn.
Marriage.
You know, I actually when I was like first studying this area, I started looking for shepherd jobs. In UK.
I said shepherd before marriage.
Shepherd before marriage, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And you know, when you were talking about the different kind of emotions that, even as a leader, of course, you've always got to show that that strong front. But I guess there are certain times where, you know, you do feel weak, especially in a household. And I think we see that with the Prophet ﷺ when he first got revelation. So it's interesting that you talked about like how obviously sometimes it's the wives, they're getting a bit over like emotional, and then the Prophet ﷺ has to be that cool kind of like calm person. But can we give us an example of when
The other way around.
Yes.
Yes, the other way around, it happened to the Prophet ﷺ. There were times that he needed his wives to comfort him, to help him, because again, the marriage, we said, is a partnership. It's not one-sided. It's a partnership. There's going to be times that you need to be the one who's there for your wife, and there's going to be times that you need your wife to be there for you, right? You're taking care of one another. You care about each other. You are conscious of each other, etc. The Prophet ﷺ, when he first received revelation, and he was in Ghar Hira, and Jibreel alayhi salam came to him, and he revealed to him, Iqra, right? And he saw Jibreel in his actual form, by the way, the first time. This huge angel. The Prophet ﷺ, he was terrified. He thought that he was afraid for his own life. He thought he was losing his mind. And he then runs, after he received revelation, he runs from Jabal Nur or Jabal Hira, and he goes straight to the house of Khadija radiallahu anha. And he's terrified. And what is he saying? Zammiluni, zammiluni, dathiruni, dathiruni. Cover me up, cover me up. لَقَدْ خَشِيتُ عَلَى نَفْسِي, I feared my own life. And then Khadija's worried. She's thinking, what's happened, Ya Rasulullah? He's not a messenger at the time. So she said to him, what's happened? What's the matter? And he explains to her what has occurred. And this great woman, this intelligent woman, this strong woman, she says to him, after she hears everything, she said, Kalla. She said these statements, these words, Kalla la yukhzika Allahu abada. Innaka la tasil al-rahim. Wa tahmilu al-kal. Wa taksibu al-ma'doom. Wa tuqri al-dhayf. وَتُعِينُ عَلَى نَوَائِبِ الْحَقِّ. She said these words. She said, Allahu Tabarak wa Ta'ala will never disgrace you. Allahu Tabarak wa Ta'ala will never forsake you. Allah will never abandon you. This is not going to happen, Ya Muhammad. I'm certain of it. Why? Because you have these qualities that I'm going to mention now. You keep ties with the kin. You help those who are in need. You honor the guest. You support just causes. Someone who has these qualities that you have, O Muhammad alayhi salatu salam, Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala never abandon them. Allah will never forsake them. Allah will be with you. That's a fact, she said to him. This is a time now, the Prophet ﷺ, he needed that support, and he got that support from his wife. She's giving him that reassurance that no, you're not losing your mind. Allah Tabarak is not going to forsake you. Rather, you're going to achieve something great. Something great is going to happen. And then on top of that, she didn't just leave it to that. Rather, she found a solution for him to help him understand what had occurred. So she took him to her cousin Waraq ibn Nawfal, who was very well read when it comes to the previous scriptures. They explained the situation to him, and he told the Prophet ﷺ exactly what it was, that it was Jibreel alayhi salam, and that he's a prophet of Allah, and that he said, if I wish I was a young man so that I could stand by you when your people exile you and fight against you. Right? But look at Khadija radiallahu anha. Look at the wisdom that she had, because wisdom is doing the right thing at the right time, in the right place, in the right method. And that's precisely what she did. She said the right thing at that time that the Prophet ﷺ needed to hear, to give him that comfort and that reassurance. And she found the right solution for that the Prophet ﷺ needed at that time to understand and to come to terms with what just occurred. Right? So you find that with the Prophet ﷺ, even the other way around. Yani. Now.
It's interesting. And I was even thinking of an incident where I think the Prophet ﷺ, I mean, he slightly got angry at one of his wives, but he not in like you know, losing his emotions completely. But I think it was when Aisha was saying something about Khadija, and then that, you know, Allah's given you better.
Yeah. It happened. The Prophet ﷺ, when his wives would be out of line, they would do anything that angers Allah, he would become angry. Aisha radiallahu anha, she says that the Prophet ﷺ never hit anyone ever, and never became angry for himself ever. But the moment the rights of Allah Azza wa Jalla were transgressed against, he would become extremely angry to the extent that his face would become red.
Yeah.
So one day, Aisha radiallahu anha, she was with the Prophet alayhi salatu salam, and then she said something about Zainab. Because Zainab, we said, they were virals, right? So she said that Zainab was short. She described that as short. The Prophet alayhi salatu said to her, Ya Aisha, do you know what you just said? The severity of what you just said? He said, if this statement was thrown into the sea, it would completely change it and affect it because of how dangerous this statement is. So the Prophet ﷺ, he would constantly be teaching his wives and correcting them and helping them get closer to Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, because that's the partnership of marriage. It's helping one another get closer to Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, helping each other worship Allah Azza wa Jal, so that you can get to that destination Jannah. So it becomes a relationship that doesn't just end here, but it extends to the hereafter Jannah, inshallah. Naam.
Is that Zainab bint Jahsh?
Bint Jahsh, naam.
Some of them have a problem because she was she was a Jew,
No, that's Safiya. That's Safiya. Even Safiya. See, Safiya, she had, some people are saying that she was a Jew previously, right? So sometimes they would shame her with that. So the Prophet ﷺ, when she came to him, she said, why didn't you respond with this response? He said, why didn't you say to them that my ancestors are Musa and Harun, right? These are my ancestors. Who do you have?
I say when people say, may Allah destroy the Jews, I say, may Allah guide them, the children of the Prophet. And Zionists see the different things.
It's different. May Allah guide all those who are misguided to the truth and the haqq, ya Rabbil Alameen. All of us, ya Rabb.
Bringing the podcast to a close, we've got about 10 minutes left. I think if we can just talk about slightly one more topic, it would be nice, specifically related to the Quran. We can start with, how did the Prophet ﷺ, what importance did he give the Quran to the Quran in his own life, and then in terms of the Quran and teaching it to his own family?
The Prophet ﷺ, he embodied the Quran, and all the Quran that was revealed to him, he taught his wives and his family. His family were perhaps the most learned people, by the way, because they had more access to the Prophet ﷺ that other people didn't have. Who is one of the most narrators of hadith? Aisha radiallahu anha. And she narrates a hadith that the other people would not know, things that the Prophet ﷺ did at home that other people would not know about. She taught, she was a alima, a scholar. And just like that, they were very learned when it came to the Quran, right? Aisha radiallahu anha and Hafsa, for instance. Hafsa was one of those who had one of the masahif of the Quran, the Qur'ans that were actually written. She had one of the copies in her home, right? Radiallahu anha. And you have Aisha radiallahu anha, you have Salama, and so on. If we were to mention them all, they were all scholars in their own right, right? And the Quran was a main part of it, because the Quran was the source of all knowledge. And the Prophet ﷺ would explain the Quran to them. And they would ask ayat to the Prophet ﷺ. For instance, if ayat was revealed, it would be revealed in their homes a lot of the time. Exactly. So then they asked the Prophet ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, this ayah, what is it referring to? What does it mean? And the Prophet ﷺ will explain it to them, and then they will spread that knowledge, and they will share that knowledge. Radiyallahu anhunna wa ardahunna. And that's how the Prophet ﷺ was at all times, that he would give a lot of time to the Quran and recite it at night, and they would be there. In Qiyamul Layl. When he recite the majority of the Quran at night, the Prophet ﷺ, his wives are there. They hear this Quran. They hear this ibadah. They're joining him in the ibadah some of the times, etc. But the Quran was an essential part of the home.
So if as a family, as a family, let's say they're not on a scholarly level as much, for example, obviously they're not going to be like the Sahabiyat, or even someone who's just just general families. How do they kind of foster within their home a connection with the Quran? And not, obviously, the Prophet ﷺ, when you think about families nowadays and their connection with the Quran, is quite artificial in the sense that it's normally just reciting it. And when you try and engage someone that, let's go beyond recitation, it's normally a thing of especially the older generation, sometimes it can be a thing of, well, I'm getting reward from reciting the Arabic, so why would I have to go beyond that?
Well, that's not the reason why the Quran was revealed. The ultimate objective of the Quran is for us to understand it, to act upon it.
Will they get as much reward as they were to understand it?
The reward would be greater right? Because you're fulfilling the objective of the Quran. So the reward, the more, because the Quran, okay, has there's different objectives, right? One of the objectives is that you hear the Quran, you listen to the Quran a lot. One of the objectives is that we memorize the Quran, right? That we learn it, we memorize and recite it correctly. That we do tilawah of the Quran, reciting it generally. And that we're also reflecting upon the Quran and understanding it and acting upon it.
Yeah.
These are all different functions of the Quran, that we're meant to be doing. It's not just sticking to one thing and leaving all the other parts, because it's as if you're leaving parts of the Quran. Right? The Quran, the reason why it was so effective and the reason why it changed the face of this universe is because those who heard it understood it.
Yeah.
And that's where the miracle is. And that's
with the family.
exactly. Those are the people, when they heard the Qur'ans, they went from enemies of Islam to those who loved Islam and the Quran. One who wanted to kill the Prophet ﷺ to one who loves him daily and wants to defend him with his own life because of understanding the Quran. Just hearing a number of verses did that, understanding it. So what do you think, if that's what it does for a kafir, one who does not believe in the Quran, does not believe in Allah, who is a disbeliever, what do you think the Quran can do for a believer who believes in Allah and the Quran and so on? When he understands it, imagine what it can do for your heart and for you as a Muslim. So of course the Quran needs to be a part of the house, listening to it, memorizing it, teaching it to our children, reciting amongst ourselves, and also making effort to understand it. Read the translation of the Quran. I find it strange that someone never read the translation of the Quran.
Yeah, and I think that's with most people, to be honest. Most Muslims, they have
Never
engaged anything with
Yeah.
the Quran. All they've done is they've recited it and they're not really...
We have so much available now. There's no excuse, right? You can get a copy of the translation of the Quran on your phone. You can get an app, right? The apps have it. You can physically buy a copy. You can find free copies that are distributed for free, just to read the translation of the Quran so that you know what Allah is saying to you.
Exactly.
Know what Allah is saying to you so that you can take the guidance of the Quran, because the guidance of the Quran is through understanding it.
But sticking to the topic of having the Quran implemented in our household, what's some practical advice you can give to just Muslim households? How would, because a lot of people, they were like, okay, they just read it, as we've discussed, they just read it and khalas, and they're like, that's enough. Or would you say something practical for them to have a much more impactful connection with the Quran?
You have like calls where you like,
a number of things. Number one, the Quran should play in the house a lot. Your children growing up around the Quran, hearing the Quran in the house, has a huge effect and it brings barakah to the home. That's the first thing.
Quick masala, can you do it when like...
No problem. No problem.
Like if you're speaking like a
conversation.
Of course you shouldn't speak over the Quran, but if the house is quiet generally, for instance, a lot of time when I was young, I used to hear the Quran. I remember this vividly. When I was a very young child, my mom, when she's in the kitchen, she's cooking, she'll have Quran playing. And she's just in the kitchen doing whatever she needs to do. But that has an effect on the household, right? It has an effect on the household. So that's the first thing. Secondly, to teach your children the Quran and to establish lessons, whether it's in your home or you actually send them to classes, right, where they're memorizing the Quran. And also the parents should be actively learning the Quran as well. You shouldn't be just, you send your children, you do it, because children learn by example. That's the second thing. By actions, of course. Thirdly, to have circles in the house where you recite Quran. The thing is, when everyone's actively learning the Quran, when the parents are learning the Quran, when the children learn the Quran, us Somalis, we have something called suba, which we do a circle and you write the Quran together. Everyone does an ayah, you go around. Right? You could just do maybe one surah, two surahs. It's not much. You don't have to do a lot, but it brings barakah to the house. And what it does is it brings everyone close together. It's a way that the family can bond. Because this is something that is missing from the household nowadays. That bond between the families and sitting together and doing things together is almost non-existent. Everyone's in their own room, everyone's on their phone, etc. So this is now something the Quran will bring everyone together. So they sit together, they recite the Quran, and maybe even read some of the meaning of the Quran, the translation of the Quran, so they can understand it. So they do mudaras of the Quran. That will bring the barakah to the household and protect the household from all evil, inshaAllah ta'ala. These are some things that can be done, bi'idhnillah.
Thank both of you very
Jazakumullah
much for being with me. You're my co-host. But I appreciate it, and I appreciate the company, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as well and benefited much. Hopefully, if you guys are interested, looking for spouses, maybe.
Spouses,
you never know.
yeah.
Or you're looking for a
Multiple,
spouse. Yeah. We have a marriage app, Sacred Spouses. It's actually currently it's a website. It's like a demo version, and you can go on that. You can sign up, and you can actually start using it. And soon there will be a app coming out, inshallah. And hopefully, we ask Allah that we are all able to go on this journey of fostering households that are strong, that are connected to God, and that are connected to His book, and that He makes us upon the people of paradise and grants us good in this life and the next. And until next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khair.
Jazakallah khairan, Ustaz.